Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, Grace. I really appreciate it. This is a panel about content creation, and we are all content creators here. It feels weird to be the dude here, but I promise it'll all make sense in a little bit. I am. I'll just introduce myself very quickly. My name is Christian Polanco. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm a co-host of the Cooligans podcast. It is a comedy show about soccer, and I've been doing stand-up for since 2008. Got into soccer as far as content creation in 2015, and it worked out. And I get to moderate this panel, and I can't believe it either. So I'm honored to be here. But I want to just give everyone an opportunity to just kind of tell your story, and we'll go in order here. Jackie, nice to meet you. Jackie,
Yeah.
I think we're the only ones that have not met in person. If I
Yeah,
could be mistaken.
likewise. Nice to meet you. Got the fancy backdrop there.
Thank you so much. This is this is the studio where it all happens. But I want to give everybody an opportunity to kind of just tell your origin story. How'd you get into the game and content creation and stuff like that? So we'll start with you, Jackie.
Yeah, sounds good. Appreciate it. Yeah, I grew up playing soccer for a very long time, for about 10 years. And then when I was in school, I wanted to be a sports journalist at 17. I know that still throws people off because they still think I'm 17 years old, but it's been like 9 years now. So I was kind of in the era where like Facebook was the coolest social media platform, and now social media has evolved so much. So and content creation as well. So being a sports journalist, covering the NWSL and Houston's national team, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I know Sky and Sylv see them all the time at games. It's like a lot of work, a lot of effort, but just seeing the game grow is something that I'm very passionate about. So being independent with my company, Woman Kickballs, I also produce content and different media services for clients in the soccer industry. So sometimes that could be weird of like being a journalist and being in the media, but then producing media for clients as well. So as I'm sure everyone knows, you wear a lot of hats when you are in this kind of space. So yeah, that's a little snippet of my journey at least.
Awesome. Yeah. But yeah, I turned on all these cameras, all the board. Yeah, I had to learn all this stuff. So that's part of it. Sky, please go for it.
What's up? So I'm Sky. So I'm from Atlanta, and growing up in Atlanta, predominantly black city, we had you had like the Atlanta beat there, but it was still soccer was perceived as a white sport for white people. But I ended up playing in the YMCA briefly, and then after like a little sexism, at the YMCA when I nutmegged the dude playing my first game of soccer at like 7. And then he went for my knee. My mom took me out, so I played softball. I played soccer again in high school when we had spring soccer in Georgia high school sports. And then basically I was like the goalkeeper because everybody was scared to dive, but Brianna Scurry did it, so I did it. And I played, but I didn't really like it until I got to Georgia Tech. And I watched soccer with people who look like me, from different cultures. And so watching like the Euros or the World Cup, that's when I fell in love with the game. And actually would skip class to watch all kinds of soccer because we had all the channels. But it wasn't. I still watched it on and off, and people were pretty shocked. In terms of content creation, me and Sills met online the late 2020, and we had talked about soccer, and we were like, hey, maybe we should do a podcast. We ended up connecting. Actually, we talked. We didn't know what to do, but Grego from Culture United reached out and was like, hey, y'all should do a podcast, seeing us interact online. And that actually started the process of like, okay, let's look at what that looks like. So that's how I got into the content creation. In terms of what I do from that side, end up dealing with the audio. I'm doing a lot of the audio stuff out, so I had to learn audio equipment and stuff like that. Getting into how do you produce, how do you edit, all that kind of stuff. And then for me, like, I'm not trying to be a journalist, I'm trying to do content creation to build community. So I guess that's the portion that I'm happy to talk about through this whole thing.
Awesome. Meg Reyes, you have the floor.
Well, hello, team. super excited to be part of this panel. And I also am just so proud of this representation across the board. So that just makes me very happy. And so I'm just going to go right ahead and come out and be like, I never, ever played soccer. I don't think I've ever played an organized soccer game beyond like high school PE. So I'm just going to put it out there, except for when I did some creator kickoff in New York in December. And I don't know why anybody wanted me to be in that game. But a lot of people assume since I work in the industry that I played soccer. I didn't. And my way into the sport really started almost 3 years ago in 2021 when I started working for myself. The journey to being a content creator for me was very untraditional. I came from a sports marketing background. I'd worked in all facets on the front office side for teams and media outlets in sports in general. And when I decided I wanted to, one, create a podcast, and two, realize that I had fun and this knack for getting people to open up, is when I decided I wanted to be a creator. And once that happened, a lot of the projects that were being pitched to me were in the soccer space. At the time, I didn't understand it. In hindsight, now it makes sense with the growth of the game and the investment of the game. There's a lot of me, there's a lot of us in other sports. There's not enough us at that time in soccer. And so there's a lot of need for growing the game. And since then, I've become super passionate about it. It's what I do. It's what I get excited to wake up to do every day. So, and I also am very proudly the Women in Soccer social media coordinator. So a lot of my work is on camera, interviewing. I kind of consider myself media, but I'm not like a traditional journalist. I'm not here to break news. I'm here to bring personalities out of people. And then at the same time, I also do some social media work. So it's a little background on where I'm at right now.
Amazing. All right, Sylvia, also of Shea Butter, please go for it.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. So like Sky said, we got into this together. We met online. So she gave you the story there. For me, I am like Meg. I didn't grow up playing soccer, but there was soccer around me. So my very first story is I used to work concessions at the Richmond Kicker games with my dad and my sister to help fundraise. And I used to sneak off to go watch the games. So that's how I first fell in love with soccer. So up the roost to this day. And then of course I'm a child of the 99ers. So I think whatever, love I had planted by the Kickers was solidified by the 99ers. But my public high school didn't have a soccer team until my senior year. So I didn't really get to play. We didn't have the access. So I played basketball, softball, I joined the band, I did everything else. Didn't really get the chance to play, but always watched. I was able to find teams on my own, sort of pick who I wanted to, watch, who the players that really moved me. Most of them are from South America, maybe the African continent. So just really loved the game, loved a certain style. Like I loved the 94 Columbia team for the men's side too. Like if you want to guess the kind of football I like. So just kind of watched it off and on as life happened. I didn't get to watch it as much. And then the world shut down and I got to watch way too much of it. But yeah, I think for me, it was seeing a need, right? Like looking around, not seeing myself and saying, okay, then we'll do it. Like Sky and I are just like, we'll be the people to do the thing that we see is needed. And so hopefully that's what we're doing. And I guess I'm a bit of both, obviously content creation, but I do like to write. I do like to cover stories and storytell that way. And I think there's a myriad of ways to tell stories in this space, particularly of those that don't get told a lot. So,
all right, I completely agree. I mean, you mentioned the Richmond Kickers. I've actually done stand up in Richmond for Richmond Kickers supporters, and they sang their chants in the comedy club.
Nice.
So I mean, they go hard for sure. It was
a passionate fan base.
It was great. And I say that to say, because we're all sort of talking about representation, and I think everybody here has their niche of representation in itself. I mean, for me, I'm Dominican, grew up in Brooklyn. The Dominicans are not really even known for soccer. So even getting into this space, even other Latinos are like, why are you here? You play baseball. So that's even a barrier that sometimes I feel like I have to break. But even as a comedian, I sort of have to convince people that it's okay to laugh about this sport. I think when the Cooligans first began, people were a little bit skeptical of like, oh, who are these clowns? Are they going to be making fun? Americans tend to make fun of soccer. So we got to be like something that's a little bit different. So I kind of want to talk about that representation when it comes to content creation. What do you feel about your role in representing something bigger than yourself in the content that you create? And we'll start with Jackie.
I had a feeling that was going to happen. So yeah, I think about this question a lot in that aspect of representation, because when I first started going to games, I think it was back in like 2018, and I'm from Southern California, so at the time we didn't have NWSL teams, so I started off covering or like going to games for the U.S. Women's national team. And I remember like walking into like the press conferences and like being the youngest Hispanic female in the room and instantly just feeling like I didn't belong. And it was this weird like imposter syndrome where you're like, what am I doing here? Like everyone is so much older than me and has more experience. And like, you know, you just start thinking of like all those doubts and reasons like why you shouldn't be there. And yeah, so I think representation is super important. And I look at even today in 2024, like I usually am like still the youngest Hispanic female in the room. So I'm hoping that that changes because yeah, I just think like when you have more diversity and different perspectives in the room, it allows for just stories, like so many cool and creative stories to come out too. So I actually get like a lot of random, but I kind of get like a lot of messages from moms who are like, my daughter looks up to you. And I think that's when it really clicks of like, oh, wow, like, yeah, I'm making a difference, or there's impact in certain areas, because you don't always see that right away. Like, I think it's easy to have tunnel vision and kind of get caught up in your work or like what you're doing. So yeah, I'm really just like grateful and humbled when those moments come along, because I think it's a really cool reminder of just the why. And like, as you're doing your own thing in your own space, like someone else is seeing that and is being inspired. So I feel like even when times are hard, just to like keep pushing through it and going for it is important. So that's just kind of like an example and a story of at least how I see representation and just the impact that it can have in people's lives that you don't even know. So
yeah, I'll be honest. I get 0 messages from moms saying any messages like that. So I gotta up my game. Weirdly enough, I've gotten 1 message from a very sweet mom who brought her son to a live show that we did in Minnesota with Miguel Ibarra when he was at Minnesota United, and this kid was probably about 10 years old when he came to the show, and I think he's about 14 or 15 now, and she'll randomly update me like, oh, he started this academy and he loved the show. The kid was so shy. He didn't want to say a word. He was meeting his hero soccer player, couldn't get a word out of his mouth. But then she tells me, she's like, that was one of the most impactful moments of his life. I'm like, well, you're welcome, ladies.
yeah, I know it.
So I also we didn't get a chance to speak before. All of us didn't get a chance to speak before. And I'll ask a question. If somebody doesn't want to answer, I don't want to necessarily put the question on everybody so that everybody has to answer, but feel free. This is the Women in Soccer Career Fair podcast for, if you guys want. So, but as far as representation, if I know when it comes to Shea Butter and obviously Meg Reyes, the Between Two Worlds, I mean, this is both, all of you do incredible work, specifically that I've consumed, that I really know when it comes to representation, when it comes to Filipino stuff, I look to Megan Reyes. When I look to Black female soccer players, I look to Shea Butter. So what is the, I don't know, what is like the meaning to you, or even what are the challenges that you may kind of have to face just in making that kind of content, because it is niche, it is, tends to be specifically for a targeted audience. But your thoughts on just being in that space?
I can jump
Whoever
in
wants
on
to
this.
go.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this super quick. So I think when it comes to representation, just answering that first part of the question, what I think is special here is all of us on this panel, we're all here and our why is to grow the game. And then I think there's a lot of layers to that. I think also for the most of us here, one of the layers is to grow the women's game. And then beyond that, we all have our little niches. And for mine, I feel like I like to grow the game in America in all ways, and that includes lower level leagues and all the other leagues that don't get a lot of coverage as MLS or NWSL. And then I found in the last year or so this really special and like near and dear to my heart niche, covering the Philippines and also just bringing awareness to Asian football in general. And so, yeah, thank you for shouting out Between Two Worlds. I created that podcast last year as just a passion project to follow the women's national team's journey to the World Cup. And I did find it quite challenging in its own ways. I mean, unlike the US or Canada or Germany, Spain, any of these large giants in the game, these smaller countries, and oftentimes we have to remember third world countries, don't have federations that have a lot of money. So with that said, it's a lot more difficult to figure out when games are being played, where they're being played, getting in contact with the right people. I was very fortunate that I got connected with someone who is a media member covering Philippines football in Manila for, I think, about 10, 12 years now, who connected me directly to the media director of the women's national team at the time. And through that, I was able to get interviews with the players. But there's a lot of challenges with the bureaucracy of every federation and the politics of it. And then also for me, the time change. It was incredibly difficult to interview these players, not only with a time change of the Philippines, but then also at that time, a lot of them were playing with their club teams all over Europe. So there's always certain challenges when it comes to covering teams outside of the US, but I found that that's what I really love to do. I, of course, as an American myself, root for the US, and I also know it's in good hands. It's getting a lot of coverage, and so I've kind of found it my why to also cover other countries that are making just as tremendous strides.
Amazing. Sky and Sylv, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're going to go in reverse order this time. I mean, oh gosh, I could talk about this for multiple panels. I think I'm with Meg on that, right? Like, what is our why? Our why was twofold. One, we simply did not see the stories about, for us originally, Black players, and that's expanded to front office, coaching, fans, like honestly, refs probably should be included in that. Like, there's a whole group of people. And we did that coming off the back of everything that happened in 2020. Obviously, got a lot of attention. How that's gone since then, we have a different conversation. But it was a time to be able to tell those stories. There was a hunger for those stories. And then I think, too, for us is deconstructing some things, right? It's not just that Black players weren't getting a coverage, but when they were, it's the pace and power conversation. Is they can't play midfield because they're not intelligent conversation. It's all of these things that we were also trying to debunk by storytelling, by sharing their stories, by sharing the whole player, not just the person on the pitch, but also absolutely giving credence, validity, statistics, everything to the people on the pitch. And for us, that all of that comes in the form of storytelling, right? So yes, there are elements of journalism in there, right? Like I tend to be the writer, but also just doing interviews, creating content, how we talk about the game, what we bring to the game as ourselves, right? To be authentic is to change how it's going to go, and how this game is talked about, and how people in this game, Black people in this game, are talked about. Are there challenges? You bet. I just access, for one, right? These aren't stories that have been told before, right? So getting people to buy into trust has been work, right? We've been at this for almost 3 years now. We're just building those relationships. We've just gotten the trust of some of those people to be like, okay, yeah, if I share my story, if I do this, if I give them something that I hold near and dear to me, they will do right by it. That doesn't mean we're not critical. It doesn't mean any of that. But having that trust is really big from a group of people who historically haven't been treated very well, right? So making sure you're holding that in place as well. And I could, again, talk all day, but I'm not the only one on my show, so I will let Sky go from there.
Yeah, so we do storytelling, also approaching from the lens of education, and community building. So I think we, as Black people, we can't talk about this without talking about the racism and then the white supremacy within the sport, and then the impact it's had. Like, we are in 2024, and I still get asked, why do I have a Black soccer podcast for a white sport, from all kinds of people, all kind of ethnic groups. And so getting to the point of being able to show that you can be who you are. I'm Black, I'm lesbian, I look how I look, more masculine of center. And so people have perceptions of me when I walk in a room, and then they question whether or not I know soccer or understand things. When I predict a bunch of stuff because I know the game. Like, we gotta be for real. But with that said, giving people the space to be able to be themselves, talk about the game in a way they can understand it. You know, me and Sills talk on a show about all kinds of topics. And like, you can't separate the game from the culture, the politics, and the things that happen. So, you know, people connect with that, and even people who don't initially pay attention or care about the soccer. And so as a result, you know, people get into the game. We've had, you know, basketball players, basketball fans, all kinds of people listen to our show, not knowing what soccer was, and then get really into it because they heard how we spoke about it, connected to it, and vibe with it. But then also get into the point of community building. You know, it's an important part. You know, for me, the frustration with soccer for a long time was like seeing the game and I didn't feel connected to what's perceived as the American version of it because I didn't see my culture or feel my culture. And so, you know, getting to the point of being able to bring in, you know, aspects of culture into it, you know, whether we talking fashion, whether we talking music, you know, what that looks like so that the game looks like it is across the world where culture comes into it. Like, it should be a litty experience when you had a soccer game. It shouldn't be like a sterilized, boring version. But, you know, being able to open the door to bring that space, you know, hear from supporters that just don't look one way, including Black supporters, brown supporters, you know, getting into why you have those kind of supporter groups. Shout out Rose Room, Black Fires, Black Herons. We can go down the list. But, you know, why do they exist? Why did they have to come into existence? And what does it look like welcoming these groups of people in? Also, you know, opening the door so we can talk about stuff like racism and what it looks like, because people think it's saying an offensive thing, but when it plays out in structures, you know, the access, the micromanaging, the lack of being able to empower people to be themselves in the space, you know, opening the door so people can see, like, it don't matter whether you got the money or not, or you have the accesses, but just trying, you can see yourself and do things. So before I go on a whole tangent, you know, that's a big portion of the representation piece from my vision, you know, and for us, we trying to do community building. So there's content and stuff coming this year that you'll see more of.
Okay. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you know, I know a lot of times people may say, or you may see it online about like, you know, keep politics out of sports, but it is literally impossible. Politics is sports. Sports is politics. It's it's disingenuous to think otherwise. You know, I think from there's a couple great points that have been coming up. So, mentioning accessibility. I want to just talk about this just for in case people are, you know, watching and are interested in getting into this, you know, type of job. Accessibility is really just crucial because it's obviously, you know, for me, you know, the first active player we had on our show was Juan Agudelo. He played for the New England Revolution, and for me, it's like this man will always be a legend in my mind. I couldn't believe he agreed to do the show. He didn't know who we were. He was just like, "Oh, I seen you guys on Twitter and agreed to hop on." But this is, can we talk a little bit about your challenges with this? Because, you know, it's difficult to find a lane in this industry if, like you said, people don't trust you to let you interview a player, to make sure that the club is going to look good, that the brand is going to look good, that the player is going to look good. Everybody kind of just wants a net positive result after they work with anybody in media. So feel free. I don't know who wants to go first, but maybe share kind of those challenges. I mean, for me, it took years to build that trust, and there's no easy way around that. That involved not only consistently doing a podcast that people liked and that we were proud of. We were trying to bring the, you know, just bridge comedy and soccer together. That's really, a lot of soccer players had never even met comedians. You know, we get sometimes people, you know, compliment our show and say like, "Oh, I love that you have female soccer players on the show," and that's not something you need to thank me for. The players themselves it is a blessing that they would even be on the show. And then the women's soccer players are hilarious. They have great personalities. They have so much to share that we're just trying to give them a comedic platform to do that. So that is, you know, that helped with accessibility, where a lot of players in NWSL they may see an interview on our show and they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that show because that seems like a better vibe than a traditional sports show. So what have been your experiences with accessibility? Whoever wants to go.
Well, I'm the only one unmuted, so I guess I'll go. I think I have two parts to this question. One, I think even as fortunate as I have been this many years into my independent career as a creator, challenges and hiccups, some tears sometimes when it comes to being granted access literally at some events, up and even as of recently. I don't know if it's this challenge of separating myself as a traditional media member, again, who's here to report and write published pieces versus this new era of content and just being a personality. So I've had challenges when it comes to actually having access at events. And then with that said, when I am also fortunate to have the ability to sit down with players, I think in particular, as we're talking about here, I really just try and capitalize on the moment. And I think where I've found my lane is sometimes I've realized they're often just as nervous as I am before an interview. So that helps quell any anxieties. And I've seen oftentimes a lot of them ask beforehand, like, what are we going to talk about? And the thing is I don't actually talk about X's and O's with them because that's not my specialty. I talk about them and I want to get to know them. And so I really just try and leverage those conversations. And then I hope that then later builds trust and creates this resume of sorts for the next time I try and get an interview. I was so fortunate a couple weeks ago that I got to sit down with Maya Doms like a week after she was drafted into the league. And it was, fortunately for me, a no-brainer when I asked the media team if I could talk to her, knowing that this interview wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't going on any outlet. Like, it ended up just going on my Instagram account. So that's really what I try and do, is just be authentic and really just use every opportunity as a time to show later in life, like, if you're going to question what I do and why I do it, like, please look at this one video or this one piece.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't want to diminish the outlet that is Megan Reyes. It's not no outlet. That is an outlet, and it's okay. I know we all have this severe imposter syndrome that, like, oh, I'm not a big deal or whatever. But there is just having a TikTok, just having an Instagram is a platform, and it can build into something obviously much bigger. But like you said, I think the resume, constantly building that, does improve that trust, because I think there's sort of the options of, like, you can build connections with clubs, with players, with brands, or you can just focus on building a community and just getting like-minded people that appreciate your work. And it's sometimes a difficult balance, because sometimes what the community wants is not what the club wants or the player wants. So it's finding that lane. But once you sort of decide that that's what feels right, that's what you kind of push towards. But yeah, I don't want to cut anybody else off if anybody has any other thoughts on the accessibility question.
I mean, I think it comes back to the concept of accessibility to get into the space. The accessibility of access of soccer across the board is hard due to pay for play. But then that scales its way when you get into the media side, and even trying to come in as an independent outlet. It's a perception of what is seen as reputable media, and then the concept of media, and then perceptions from there that, players can have perceptions not necessarily good about media due to how coverage has been. And then it gets even more magnified when you talk about the marginalized groups. So if you're looking at it like a Black player, it takes time to build like confidence and trust, even though we look like them, because of what's happened with media in the past, even with media who look like us.
Right.
So you have to build that trust when you put out stories, keeping it real and not just doing stuff for clout or trying to get paid. Like, keeping it real and showing that, anything that you say, it can be said in confidence as necessary. Or if we're putting something out, we're not trying to make it to try to get one up. Like, we're putting it out there to tell a story, to share how they want it to be shared. And then you get to the club side, you know, how do you find the access for it? It's hard. We've been blessed to have a lot of people who've helped us navigate those type of things. But I mean, it goes back to the whole concept of access, the gatekeeping. Um, it's hard. Then you get into, you know, how do you contact? Is it the club? Is it the agent? You know, understanding those different things, and that's not directly put out there. So, I mean, building community to get through there is important. But again, this gets really gatekeepy in a sense that I mean the access isn't there. Um, so then, you know, we've had to build community across the board with different types of people to get to that space. But yeah, it's just you'd have to it's getting the access whenever you find it, but then when you do it, showing that you are a person of your word and being able to establish the trust that you can put out a product that's genuine and authentic.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta when you get the opportunity, you gotta crush it. That's really basically what ends up happening. Jackie, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, I feel like I talk about access a lot because being independent.
I didn't see my culture or feel my culture. And so, you know, getting to the point of being able to bring in, you know, aspects of culture into it, you know, whether we talking fashion, whether we talking music, you know, what that looks like so that the game looks like it is across the world where culture comes into it. Like it should be a litty experience when you had a soccer game. It shouldn't be like a sterilized, boring version. But, you know, being able to open the door to bring that space, you know, hear from supporters that just don't look one way, including black supporters, brown supporters, you know, getting into why you have those kind of supporter groups. Shout out Rose Room, Black Fires, Black Herons. We can go down the list. But, you know, why do they exist? Why do they have to come into existence? And what does it look like welcoming these groups of people in? Also, you know, opening the door so we can talk about stuff like racism and what it looks like because people think it's saying an offensive thing, but when it plays out in structures, you know, the access, the micromanaging, the lack of being able to empower people to be themselves in the space, you know, opening the door so people can see like it don't matter whether you got the money or not, or you have the accesses, but just trying, you can see yourself and do things. So before I go on a whole tangent, you know, that's a big portion of the representation piece from my vision, you know, and for us, we trying to do community building. And so there's content and stuff coming this year that you'll see more of that of.
Okay. Okay. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you know, I know a lot of times people may say, or you may see it all online about like, you know, keep politics out of sports, but it is literally impossible. Politics is sports. Sports is politics. It's disingenuous to think otherwise. You know, I think from there's a couple great points that have been coming up. So, mentioning accessibility. I want to just talk about this just for in case people are, you know, watching and are interested in getting into this, you know, type of job. Accessibility is really just crucial because it's obviously, you know, for me, you know, the first active player we had on our show was Juan Agudelo. He played for the New England Revolution, and for me, it's like this man will always be a legend in my mind. I couldn't believe he agreed to do the show. He didn't know who we were. He was just like, "Oh, I seen you guys on Twitter and agreed to."
Like it's so much different compared to when you have a big name publication title. And so like I've noticed it a lot too with Women Kickballs. I mean, I've been doing stuff with that for like 5 years now. And just a few months ago, I started freelancing for Forbes. And so now I get embargoed news more and I get people pitching me stuff more. And so I just noticed the differences of being treated very differently with teams, with other people. And so it's just interesting when you kind of notice like, oh, wait, I've known you for like a long time. And now you're suddenly like wanting me to interview this player and providing all the resources. Like, why didn't this happen before when I was still putting in the work and showing up to games? So I feel like access is a big thing because like Sky was saying, there's no like guidebook or like rule book of how to do something. And you know, before like back in the day when the NWSL's website, I mean, it's grown a lot, but I was Googling like people's PR contacts or teams PR contacts and Googling them and trying to find them on like LinkedIn or something. And now on the website, like they have a whole page for contacts. So it's like just certain things like that I feel like are so important. And so I feel like if you can't find the answer right away, like I've always been one to just like Google it or talk to someone until I can get an answer. So it's kind of hard though, because then when you do that and you're using your voice to advocate for better media access or whatever it is, people can get like weirded out or whatever. And so I've had that happen a lot recently, especially in the off season, where like I will always be respectful of this, but like I'm going to call someone out if they said they're going to do something and didn't follow through on their word when it comes to a player interview or whatever, because now that's my time and my, story or whatever that's gone to waste, or I can't do this. And so it limits you in terms of your creativity and your resources too. And so it's not something that just affects the player or the team, but like it affects us as creators. And so I think that's something that I always try to be mindful of and just try to communicate to people that I'm working with, because it can bring about a lot of challenges when people cancel or just don't do the things that they said they're going to do. So I have a lot of thoughts about that. But those are just like the, I guess, takeaways for it too.
Yeah. I mean,
Can I add something?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, really quick. I want to add something because I also want to give Sylvia the opportunity if she has an answer. But piggybacking off Jackie, and then also coming back to what you shared earlier, Christian, as far as like, not to discredit whatever outlet you have. I think it's really important for anyone on this listening into this panel that's curious and has an interest in seeking a career in content creation to never let your following size discourage you. We all have, everyone here on this panel and everyone in the audience we all have different following size, but we all have influence. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters. And sometimes it can be very easy to get discouraged of no one's going to see this, or maybe the accessibility piece becomes difficult at a certain point of time because of your follower size. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of being in digital content. But I think it's also really important to remember, like, regardless of how many followers you have, if you have a YouTube channel, if you don't, if your primary outlet is Instagram or whatever it may be, that there is influence and eventually it will pay off. Maybe in a moment, a certain interview or a certain piece of content isn't going to get you paid. And sometimes I even struggle with that, as we all do as independent creators. How are we going to, keep our roof over our head? But I always try and remind myself that maybe this piece isn't going to get me paid, but eventually it may come back and it may help with the accessibility. It may help with the dollar amount or whatever it may be. And maybe with time, it also help with the following size. So I think that's just really important to remember that when you're starting out in content, it's very easy to get caught up in the numbers game, but don't let it stop you from making your art.
Couldn't agree more. Sylvia, any thoughts?
Yeah. I'll try to keep it brief. I think to everyone's point, right, access is at best inconsistent. I think obviously as we've put in the work, we've built that trust and we're able to get those situations. I think a lot of it's gatekeeping. I also think some of it is just they don't know that they don't know, right? Like they haven't ever had to think about it before, or how media has shifted in a way that, quite frankly, traditional media is behind, right? And so what does that look like? Like, what do credentials look like when you're doing blended media? That kind of basic thinking hasn't happened, right? And I'm coming from the world of education where people are also usually behind. So that frustrates me, but I also know that's kind of par for the course, regardless of what avenue you're choosing to take. I think for me, listen, I'm very bad. You can ask Sky and everyone else involved with Shea Butter. I'm terrible at checking numbers. I'm terrible at checking statistics. I do not care. If I don't answer your comment, it's not because I don't care. Charge it to my head, not my heart on that one. Like, I'm not a great social media person. I'm on there for Shea Butter. Like, I'm on there sharing my opinions. I probably tweet the same way I did when I had like 5 followers, right? Like, that's who I am. But yeah, I think for me, it's always going to be about the reasons we started this was to speak some truth to power, and whatever that looks like, that's what we're here to do. Being independent is very frustrating. It certainly doesn't pay. I promise you it doesn't. But I also like the freedom that I have. I also like the ability to say the things that need to be said sometimes, or things that I want to say. I like the ability to figure things out as we go, right? We know we can do this and it doesn't work. We know we can do this and it does. And I think because we've tried our very best to be authentic every step of the way, it's certainly helped with our access, but it's definitely not as good as it can be. And quite frankly, neither is the representation. I still go to U.S. national team games and I'm the only Black woman there, right? Like that happened in San Diego in October. I'll be very honest with you, right? Like, so like there's still things that we have to do. And those are the things I'm going to call out because they there's somebody else, even if it's not me, there's somebody else who wants to be in that room and doesn't think they can be, right? And so I think about those people when I'm doing this, whether they look like me or not. But then also there's just stories to be told, and so that's what keeps me going. But yeah, access could be a better. I think if people simply just thought about who isn't in the room,
Right.
when they're having these conversations, that would certainly help to go a long way. And then actually putting labor, power, all of that other money behind it would be a great start. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I like being independent. I don't know.
I'm hoping, yeah, we all get to kind of influence that, be the change we want to see in the world to some degree. There's a couple just quick points. The Sayali in the chat mentioned said the online soccer community is smaller than I realized, and I would even go further. I think the soccer community is smaller than you even realize. Like so, Meg's point about getting discouraged about people not seeing stuff, they will see it. Don't It may have a low number of views. I mean, we have a fairly popular show, decent audience, and not everything bangs. Some stuff does better than others, and so we feel that same feeling of being discouraged. But the people that work in this industry see it. So trust that. So the consistency, I always advocate for that. If this is really something you want to do, just do it. Do it consistently. People will see it. You will not make money for a long time. It's really hard. It took several years. I started as a stand-up comic. I didn't make money for like 5-6 years, and then I got into soccer. Another 5 years of not making money. So, but it finally worked out in some miraculous way. So there's a couple questions in the chat, and we'll just get to these and try. Apologies for not getting to them, but we could go on for hours. This has been awesome. So let me see. I have one here from Andrea Martinez that says, from your perspective, what changes do you believe are still necessary to achieve equal visibility and appreciation for women's soccer? I mean, this is a big question. I'll just give my opinion real quick, and the answer is I do not know. I think what we're all doing helps, but I don't know what I think every person's definition of what equal visibility and appreciation is different and very subjective. It's hard to it might look different for each of us individually. I mean, for me, I consume just as much women's soccer as I do men's soccer. So for me, it is equal, the visibility. So I think it is that choice to do that, and then also to just make our show. We don't treat when we're interviewing a female player or a male player, we're not like, this is men's soccer time, this is women's soccer time. It's just soccer. And if you're gonna tune in, you're gonna hear about NWSL. You're gonna hear about the Women's World Cup, and it's not a special time. I'm not patting myself on the back because I did that. But whoever wants to share their thoughts, please go for it.
I was gonna say, so I see Doug in the chat. I'm assuming that's my Dougie out there from Rose Room, where he talked about like is understanding community over audience. So I guess one big thing, because of the access issue when we talk about soccer, that has impact. So years of not having access, people don't perceive the sport as for them in this country. And then you take it another step further. If you can't play it, touch it, then it impacts where other people care about it and engage in it. Then that impacts media coverage, that impacts branding, sponsorship, all that. So fixing the access issue goes a long way, but then actually in allowing people to feel connected to it. When people can touch and feel the sport, then you'll have the access, you'll have the increase of the equity and the inclusion with it. I mean, I hate to say trying to monetize diversity, but it's important to the aspect of what you need. So like football, American football, basketball didn't make money until everybody could play it. So I mean, it's that kind of thing. Actually, when we talk about, the concept of wanting to show it on TV, people valuing that soccer is worth it, and putting it on TV, making it accessible so people can see it on any platform, not just for a paid platform, but free. So like Ion, like people crack jokes about the NWSL doing stuff on Ion, but it's a free thing for you to be able to see whether you got cable or not. That increases access. Actually, making it where people can ingest it, but then recognizing that you're not doing this for a charity, you're doing this for money. And it treating it like a sport as a business thing. So then you marketing to adults and not just kids. Don't do this having marketing come from an angle that's like we're trying to get the families and the kids. Like adults pay money to go to games. So, actually marketing to adults of different communities, not just white people, not just people you think got a lot of money, marketing to the communities you're sitting in the cities you're playing in, marketing to diverse communities, actually valuing their time and space and energy. That will go a long way. And then actually connecting, empowering the people so that they can come in and want to come to a game, not just setting up shop and thinking, oh yeah, if I have free tickets, but like trying to get people encouraged to come to game and check it out and have a good time, I think will go a long way. But a lot of it's gonna come back to access and genuinely valuing diversity, and then trying to make it to a point of equity, inclusion, but also empowerment so that people feel connected to it and just doing for real community building, not doing for play when not doing stuff for fun, but doing it for real.